because today is Remembrance Sunday. And my granddad, Henry, my father's father, fought in the First World War. He was just 19 when war broke out. He was a conscientious objector and refused to carry a gun. He became a stretcher bearer, who at that time had a life expectancy of 10 days to a fortnight. My mother's father died in the Somme. My father's father came back from the Great War, as it was called, and settled back into civilian life, working on the railway, amongst other jobs. Married and had a family. He was a lovely man and he loved to tell a tale. He loved to have people paying attention to what he had to say and listening to his stories. He, like thousands of other people who had seen war up close, never spoke of what happened on the battlefield or in the trenches. If asked about those times, he would either walk away or change the subject. But when he was in the right frame of mind, there was no stopping him telling his tales. And one that came up regularly was he was in a group of about 50 men at the start of the war. He became friends with quite a lot of them. They played pranks on each other. Like one time my granddad came back with a rock on the stretcher and called for immediate aid from the medics, who rushed out only to find this was a stone. "What did you bring that back for?" "Well, he was just lying there and we were told to bring back anybody that was lying there." His sense of humour was worse than mine. He'd also tell us tales of what he got up to during their rest days, or when they were on leave. He spoke of the near scrapes he had and the times he thought he was dying, especially the times when he was leading the charge with the stretcher, and suddenly the stretcher became heavy as his comrade had been shot. What to do in those situations? He was told there was enough people who could help him. All he had to do was cry out for help. It didn't always work like that. He boasted about the money he won playing cards and the silly tricks he played on the other young men. He spoke fondly of the friends he made and the way they supported one another. As the war ground on and more young men came into the stretcher-bearing brigades, he would tell them not to make friends, because 9 times out of 10, they wouldn't be around for very long. It's almost as if the enemy particularly chose those who were trying to rescue those injured on the battlefield. When he started, he had a little red cross on his helmet. But he quickly realised that very often the Germans were using that little red cross as a target. So he quickly removed his helmet and just used an ordinary issued one. My granddad chose the stories he shared carefully because he wanted them to have a positive effect on the listeners, especially us grandchildren when we were misbehaving. He had quite a short temper. And when he was feeling morose about the past, anything could set him off. Maybe wondering what this has to do with the gospel. In our gospel, we hear as Jesus passed along the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the lake. He said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fish for men." Shortly after, he did the same with James and John, and the four of them immediately followed him. There wasn't a long conversation about the whys and wherefores. They simply stopped what they were doing and followed him. It is possible that they may have heard Jesus when he spoke in their hometown, but there is no indication that they had previously had conversations with him. Imagine Jesus walking into this building even now and saying to each one of us, "Come, follow me." Would we have the courage, the faith, the determination to get up and follow Jesus? As fishermen, they would have put a considerable amount of time and effort into learning their craft. And it's not as though they were poor, needy men. A fisherman would have been someone who would have had a comfortable lifestyle. They weren't ignorant. They knew maths and they knew the written language. They had a great deal of schooling for that time. There must have been something in Jesus to draw them away from their lifestyle, from their work, from their homes, their friends and their families. But nevertheless, they stopped what they were doing and answered Jesus' call to follow him. They would have had no idea what they were going to experience while they walked with him in his earthly ministry, nor would they have conceived of how important the part they would play post-ascension and how much in the human history it would affect us. Just as my grandfather went to the recruiting gent in the town and took the king's shilling, he wasn't doing it for any ulterior motive, but simply to get away from home. It was a hard life he had, and he didn't see any future that was any better. So he thought, why not? If I die, I die. At least I'll have done something useful. These first disciples did not mention much of their lives they had left behind, their families, their friends, their livelihoods, in fact everything they had ever known. Their story became entwined with Christ's and each other's as they saw the birth of the early church. Their story focused on looking forward. They faced each new day as it came and dealt with whatever was presented to them, whether good or bad. Just as my grandfather did, he did what was presented to him. He used to tell me, last orders first, because the person who gave you the first order might not be around to give it to you a second time. sometimes with Jesus or the other disciples or followers with them. They did what they had to do. But equally in the later years on their own, their journey began with a simple invitation: follow me. What they showed was faith in its most beautiful and simplest form. They trusted the invitation and they said, yes. It's not the only place where we have heard this, and in a matter of weeks we will hear of how a young girl said her yes, and how it set up a course of events that literally changed the world. Are we willing to say yes to Jesus this morning? Whatever befalls us is his will, good or ill. Are we prepared to say, follow me, to those around us who do not have that light in their lives? That is what we are called to do as Christians. These events remind us that there is a shape, a plan that was formed so long ago, and each day since has added to the beauty of it. From the day that Jesus called his disciples, the first threads were added to a tapestry, and every day since, that tapestry has had more and more strands added to it, as each and every one of us brought our own unique story to the community of faith. Each one of us is part of the kingdom of God. And each of us has a story to tell. Plain, simple truths that will impact so many people. I saw this when Cara was confined to a wheelchair, that her simple faith made people think. They would stop and take stock of what they were complaining about and realize here was a lady talking to them about something greater. I wonder, as we look around at the people who are in our churches today, how many of their stories do we know? Do we know how our friends came to faith? Did they have a moment when they chose to follow Christ? Or did their faith develop slowly over a period of time? And sometimes it can be an age, a lifetime, for someone to know Jesus. I'm sure some of you will know lots of other people's stories, but I would hazard a guess that amongst our brothers and sisters, there are many stories that haven't been told and deserve to be told. You see, in addition to taking time to study the scriptures, spending time with our Lord in prayer, gathering for worship and fellowship, there is also a huge amount of value in not only listening to one another, but listening to God through each other. A great treasure trove of encouragement that we can give by telling our story. I used to think I'd got nothing important to say. And sometimes I still think I've got nothing important to say, especially at the church meetings. But when I sit at the computer and ask God to tell me what he once said, those are some of the richest moments I have with him. We are called to be saints, to know Jesus for ourselves and to take him with us wherever we go. tapestry has never stopped growing and is growing still. I know some are afraid of sharing why their faith is so important to them. And whilst this may seem to be of little significance, to think in those terms creates a disservice, not only to God, but just as importantly to themselves and to the wider church. Because it is like saying, my voice, my life, my experience doesn't deserve or need to be heard. In a world of change, and for many uncertain times, we as people of faith have the opportunity to be a clarion voice, to give those who are searching a different option to a consumerist diet which promises much, but in reality gives little by way of satisfaction and leaves them thirsty. We, and I do mean every one of us, can open a door and give them the opportunity to explore what faith would mean to them and to find the water that quenches their thirst fully. The disciples, the apostles, the early church has stood the test of time. But they stepped out in boldness, even though they were likely nervous. And this church continues to inspire and encourage people each and every day. I pray that, like my granddad Henry, we will be bold to share our stories, that we will have the wisdom to share our stories carefully, that our stories will be heard and have a positive effect on other people. After all, we have the greatest story ever to be told, don't we? So why are we not spreading that story? The end of this month sees Advent. Some of the shops are already putting up their Christmas trees. I was in one shop recently that had started playing Christmas carols. And I thought to myself, do they actually listen? Do they understand what is so special about Christmas? Do we understand? Well, that's only a question you can answer for yourself. I pray you would know Jesus more as we remember all those who went to the wars to defend our way of life, so that we could have the freedom to sit here today and say and hear these words. My dad once told me, have you ever thought what it would be like if Germany won the Second World War? And I said, no. And he looked at me and he said, well, you couldn't go to church, not without permission. You would have a job that you had to do, whether you wanted to or not.